welcome back to Cindy's Library, and today I want to talk about Elizabeth Gaskell. So, I actually finished reading her novels last year, but I wanted to reread North and South since it had been a while. So, we've got six main novels. She has written a number of novellas and short stories. Not going to talk about those here, but in order of my preference, I'm going to have to put at the bottom Sylvia's Lovers. It's probably what you are thinking of. The main character is Sylvia. There are two guys in love with her. One has been her friend. It's like the boy next door. He's quieter. He's a clerk in a store. The other's a lot more adventurous. He goes on whaling ships and things like that. And of course, she's more attracted to the second guy, who likes her, but the first guy is completely devoted to her. And the second guy, he ends up being impressed. Since this is a historical novel, even from Elizabeth Gaskell's day, this is during the Napoleonic Wars, when it was common to grab men and impress them into the army or to the navy. So he gets impressed, and really can't tell you anything else because that would be a major spoiler, except to say this is the most tragic of Elizabeth Gaskell's stories. And there's a little bit of hope and reconciliation at the end, but so much bitterness in between. So I can't say that it's my favorite. Probably will never read it again. Next on the list would be Ruth. Ruth is the story of a girl who, first of all, did her mother die in childbirth? If not, when she was a very young child. Then her father dies when she's a teenager, and she finds a place as an apprentice as a seamstress. And she there are mistaken assumptions about her which lead her to being tricked by a guy, and she ends up as a fallen woman. But this is what I like about this is it gives several different perspectives on her situation, and there's a much more hopeful ending, I felt. We aren't left in bitterness at all, even in the middle of everything. There's a few difficult chapters for her, but she makes them through. She makes it through it and builds a life for herself. Of course, part of it is a commentary on how society reacts to fallen women, which is another thing as well. So there's that. I put it at this place because it is a pretty slight book for being a full novel, but it's one I would reread. I did enjoy it. Next is Mary Barton. Elizabeth Gaskell herself wasn't entirely happy with that title. It could easily have been called, I think her father's name's is it John or Tom? Either way, it could have been called just as much by his name. So We have Mr. Barton. Uh, we have his life described. His wife dies. His daughter is apprenticed. Uh, if it's not as a seamstress, it's as a hat maker. Either way, he's a factory worker. And so we have a love triangle again, but it's which complicates things. And from the father's perspective, we get the factory worker's perspective. So plenty of industrial issues that way with uh, possible strikes, with unions, and all those things. And we also have on the other side this romance of his daughter Mary, and is she going to choose the factory owner's son or the boy next door who's always loved her? And then something happens in the middle that changes everything. But no bitterness here, not like uh, Sylvia's lovers. In fact, it turns into something of a bit of a mystery. So that's quite interesting. Definitely read it again. I quite enjoyed it. But I probably enjoyed Cranford more. Cranford, this really is more a set of interrelated short stories, all centering on the spinsters of Cranford. Few of them have a lot of money, which dictates a lot of what they do and how they do it, with them all trying to still uphold all the genteel things that they grew up with, or as close as they can. But, and they basically rule the town, which is rather, leads to some rather funny happenings. Oh, there are some very funny ones in here, but some more serious things also happen, and it is wonderful to see how these spinsters do what they can to help and support each other during difficulties. So that is a wonderful thing to watch here. So, small town life, very sweet. Next, I would have to put wives and daughters, and this is exactly what it sounds like. Oh, let's see, we have Mr. Gibson. He, his wife died when their daughter was pretty young. I'm thinking 3, maybe 4, if not as an infant. But as Molly grows up to be a young lady, he thinks that she needs a mother. So he remarries, and their lives are turned upside down by this marriage, since his new wife also has a daughter. So in some ways it's kind of the Cinderella story, kind of not. We also get to meet Squire Hamley and his family. He is a great character, and he has a wonderful family. Love his wife. She's so sweet. And more to the point, there is Osborne and Robert, the 2 sons, which make things interesting as well. So there is that. The interesting thing is the second son, Robert. He is very interested in natural history, almost a scientist, a biologist of some sort, if one could be called such at such an early time. It's probably of the generation that helped solidify a lot of what we think of as science these days, at least as far as biology, classification, things like that. So that is a very interesting thing. You don't see that necessarily a whole lot in Victorian literature. And then finally, you knew it was coming, North and South. This, well, I gave a full review of this last week, and I will link to all the reviews I have of all of these. But in short, this is Pride and Prejudice during the Industrial Revolution in the northern manufacturing town for most of it. You have uh, Margaret Hale. She grew up when she wasn't in London in the countryside in the south of England. Her father's parish in an agricultural area. But when her father decides to leave the Church of England and therefore he has to leave his parish, they move to Milton, a northern manufacturing town, which is unlike anything she has encountered before. And her father's first and perhaps best pupil is Mr. Thornton, factory owner, who is also nothing like anyone she has ever met before. We also get the perspective of the Higgins uh, family that works in the factory, and all of these threads intersecting in various ways. So quite enjoyable. And I'm glad I have can say I have read all of Elizabeth Gaskell's novels. Oh, it is a pity she didn't write more, although thankfully there are lots of novellas and even more short stories, so there is that. And maybe I'll do a video about that, but I'll need to do some rereading if I'm going to rank some of those, so we'll have to see. In the meantime, what is your favorite Elizabeth Gaskell? I would love to hear all about it. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly appreciate it. So until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading.